Good afternoon, my fellow dirty gardeners. I'm Iron, the Dirty Dragon. Finally summertime here. Yay! I'm going to go over a bunch of things in my garden that will help with creating certain effects, I guess, in terms of garden composition. Things that will make it feel more welcoming. Things that will add some sort of grounding and stabilizing in areas where it might feel a little too chaotic. Some artistic rules of composition that I can bring in from photography and my painting. Ways to play with making it feel, just generally speaking, more comfortable to be in. And so I'm also going to show you, there's some places in my garden that I'm going to be working on soon that will be the exact opposite of what you want to try to accomplish, and I'll tell you why. Something that works really, really well in the garden is negative space, calm space. This area here, when we moved in, it's right next to our pond. It was covered with invasive stuff and ground covers, and so I cleared it out. Right now I'm using it for my seeds. So it's not quite as calm as I would like it, but I brought in about 3 tons of river rock, leveled it, took all the invasive stuff out and the ground covers, and made it into this really relaxed open space. Somebody came by yesterday, or the day before yesterday, and said that it was like an oasis, and that is exactly what I was trying to accomplish, is just a calm space amidst all of the rest of the greenery in my garden, because it doesn't all need to be green. It's very, very important for the mind, aesthetically, to have a space that's calm and doesn't actually have anything going on. It's a way to rest the mind. And so I'll show you a few examples of negative space. This is one of them, right under my palm tree here. I'll go and show you another one too. Curved beds. In a lot of gardens, people have very straight edges, which makes it really convenient for mowing. I've actually straightened out this edge because it was so inconvenient for mowing, and he had it when we moved in here so that it went in right in front of the roto there and then into there. So I brought it all out so that it's totally straight. However, you'll notice that even with that, there's a lot of curves in my garden, a lot of ins and a lot of outs, and it's a more natural flowing feeling to have things that aren't straight so much. Now, this, of course, is how I like to garden. I'm not saying that it's wrong to do the other way, because in a formal garden, those straight lines help to maintain that sense of order. And in that case, it's comforting because it's more contained and more structured. And so I'm not going to say that it's not right to do it that way. I'm just going to say that in order to create a sense of organic motion, I guess, and calm, the more curves you have around your garden beds, the more comfortable it feels for the energy flow, I suppose. It's not all lines and corners. And okay, so this is a total mess here. I'll explain that in a second. But yeah, the curves just make it so that it feels just really comfortable and really, really organic, like I said. Okay, this has nothing to do with garden composition, except that I am creating, okay, maybe it does. I'm using plastic to suppress the weeds here, and the weeds being the lawn. My lawn is that kind of grass and buttercups, creeping buttercups that all like spreads by underground rhizomes and that bullshit. So the plastic is down. I'm going to cover it all with mulch like this and just let it cook for probably about a year or so. At which point I may or may not remove the plastic. I don't know. I kind of like leaving the plastic there because what it does is it means that nothing can grow through into the ground. And these guys, this bullshit, will not go back into there because there's nothing nutritious that they can't get out. It can't get out. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because I'm making these walkways that are going around. I've created these 2 island beds here, one here and one here. And these walkways that I've put all the chips down, these are new. It used to be weedy lawn all back in here, and it was just a pain in the ass to weed whack and mow, and it looked awful, really. So this makes it so that my beds have a much nicer presentation and gives me a chance to have a nice space to walk around them and makes mowing easier. So in terms of garden composition, I guess accessibility. This would help with accessibility. It would help with mowing. It would help with the way that the beds are sort of featured, I suppose. It looks like crap right now, as you can tell. But once the chips are in there, it's almost like a frame, in a way, for these garden beds. And it just adds, it makes this part kind of pop and look a little more presentable. So in that regard, this nasty crap right here actually does pertain to my video. And now we'll move on. Alright, this it's not a very good time of day to shoot this because it's late in the day, so this is half in shade and half in sun, but I'm going to try and demonstrate something else that's really good to know. As you can see, I've got something on each end of my bed here, and this is a corner, so I've got something in the corner there, and something in the corner there. And then I've got something in the middle as well, and what that does is it divides the garden into 3 different sections. And in art and in photography, the rule of thirds is that the mind prefers to see things in certain key areas and in certain key zones. It's more attractive that way. If you have, for example, this wide bed here like this, and you had a tree here, and a tree here, empty here, empty there, and empty there, it would not be pleasing to the eye. And I will try and go into that a little bit more with a diagram later to show you exactly what I mean, and you can see examples. I'll show you examples of what's done with the rule of thirds and what's not. This bed has been done in the rule of thirds. Alright, so back in here there's another thing, and this is corners and edges. If you have a very, very long, like, edge, what do you call it, a border, a garden border, you want to offer something like bookends, essentially, at either end to help sort of stop the eye and help it sort of feel stabilized at the end of the garden bed. So over here is like one of my workspaces that I've just set up for when I divide for my plant sales. And that's the end of the bed. Very conveniently, there's a catalpa tree there, but I would have put something big in there anyway. So that helps to define the space and make it feel more grounded so that it's not just kind of going and then falling off. And the corner is the same. I'll go to another spot and show you a corner and give you the same example. Here's a bit out front. The noise behind me is my air conditioner. Apologies for that if it's sounding annoying. So in the corner, if you don't have anything in that corner to sort of ground that space, it's going to leave a sense of sort of emptiness. Your mind will go in, because that's the way that corners do, and then won't have anything to hold on to and sort of anchor the space that you're in. And that can be really sort of, in terms of composition, that can be really frustrating for the eye and for the mind. It's not restful at all. The same is applicable when you have a slope. If you've got a sloping space and it goes down and there's nothing at the bottom to help sort of stop your eye, it feels very chaotic and it almost feels uncomfortable. And this is something that I've talked to a lot of gardeners about, is how to sort of bring that visual stop so that you're not just kind of trailing off. It's almost like when you see a photo of somebody and the photo has all of this space empty and then the person is here but they're walking out of the frame. And it is a technique that people do use in photography to create a sense of like uncomfortable energy, just walking out of the frame. In this case, though, in gardens, most of the time you probably don't want to create that effect. So it's kind of in line with what I was saying about the ends of garden beds. Slopes are the same thing. There needs to be something there to ground it and to sort of stop the mind from just trailing off into nothing. But back to the corner thing, have something that's tall, something that will offer like a fullness there. If it's really airy, it's not gonna do the job unless the entire thing is airy. Like if you've got an airy fence or like screening or something like that, and then you have something airy, that's okay. But it's always better to have something that's nice and sort of gives a little bit of a sense of like heaviness to it in a corner. So that is another tip. All right, paying attention to texture. Texture is huge in the garden, huge. Because whether or not you are a perennial gardener or a shrub gardener, or whether you're gardening with full sun or full shade, you are not going to have flowers all the time. And unless you're gardening maybe with annuals. So the texture is a huge part of how you maintain interest during the entire season. You can see here, I've worked in, I've got ferns, I've got Solomon's seal, I've got the podophyllum, I've got heucheras, I've got grass, I've got brunnera, more ferns in there. There's a ton, hostas, there's a ton of texture in this one area, and for the most part, most of them are just all different kinds of green. So that is a really, really important thing to keep in mind, is not to put too many things of the same texture together. So if you've got, for example, a whole bunch of things that have this kind of, upright foliage, like a daylily or irises or grasses, don't put them all together. Break them up. Use something with lacy foliage next to something that has big round foliage, and then next to something that's got smaller heart-shaped foliage. Just play with the different shapes. And what I've found is if I'm putting together a bed, I will put in things in a pot first when I'm composing a bed, unless it's already, partly composed. But even then, I'll take a pot and I'll put it in and I'll leave it there and I'll walk away and I'll come back. And if the pot goes, whatever's in the pot, if it's like, fuck no, I don't belong here, then I pull it out. And even if it looks good the first time I put it in, sometimes it'll be like, nah, bitch, you put me in the wrong place. And then so I fix it. And it overall, it helps my sense of harmony, because I walk away and it's almost like when you take a picture of something, somehow that allows you to see some details that you wouldn't see if you were just looking at it with your eye. This comes in handy with all kinds of things. With my paintings, I would do this all the time. I would take a picture and I'd be like, oh, God, that looks like crap. And I'd go in and fix it, but I wouldn't see it because I was too close to it, just looking at it with my eye. So yeah, texture is really, really, really important, especially in shady areas, because you cannot work with color as much as you can with a sunny area. So yeah, big, big, big one there. Alright, this bed looks a little bit shitty right now because it's hot and I've been pulling things out of here, but the reason that I wanted to bring this bed up is because there's a really important aspect to it. apart from the rule of thirds, which I introduced in another section of this video, but that is highlights and lowlights. And this is something that is very important in photography and in art. Things that are really bright draw the eye first, like for example right over there, that one, and the flowers of this hosta here. And then I've got this one here, it's a phlox. Those are going to draw your eye first. However, if you don't have those and you only have just shades of green and nothing bright, it's kind of chaotic and there's nowhere to sort of rest the mind. In addition to that, if you don't have anything dark, like for example, my ligularia here, really nice black foliage, and then I've got over on that side, a little bit hard to see in this light, but this is a sambucus, black sambucus, and together they balance the composition of this in terms of light. There's things to draw the eye first over there, and then there's things to rest the eye, which are just really nice and dark. And it helps to sort of just showcase the greens, all of the greens, rather than having it all relatively the same. And that comes from photography and painting as well. So good way to maintain interest in a bed. Okay, another thing to avoid. I'm not showing you it in my garden, but I'm showing you how you could easily do this if it's not set up right. Everything's looking pretty sad right now because it's been so hot today. But here I have Senecio angel wings, and over here I have Dusty Miller. Both have this beautiful white foliage. Now, if you have white foliage mixed in with only green and nothing else tying it in, it's going to stand out like a sore thumb. It's going to look really, how do I put it, gaudy. It's going to look really gaudy. This bed looks like absolute shite right now because I've been pulling a bunch of stuff out of it, putting a bunch of stuff back in. So don't go off of my specific bed here, but what I am showing you is if you are going to work in something that is very, very contrasty to the rest of the garden, try and follow the theme through the garden at least one other time, preferably 2 other times. I have an eryngium that goes a silver color in here. Can't see it very well, but that helps sort of bring in the silver, and then also that grass right over here. This is a carex. It's got a white variegation, so it helps tie in a little bit more with that. But if you have something like this that's just really, really bold and kind of deserty or tropical looking, and everything else looks Pacific Coast and Northwest, you know, it can look really, really awkward and out of place. So yeah, carry forward themes, especially for bolder themed things. That brings to mind another thing that helps with composition. If you have something airy, like a grass, it'll soften up a whole area and change the mood entirely of the entire bed. However, if you put in a really airy grass with really heavy, like dark things, it's going to look very out of place, in the same way that silver leafed Senecio way over there would look out of place all by itself. A grass will also look out of place by itself. So keep in mind, keep sort of themes together as much as you can to create cohesiveness. Okay, right here is one of my favorite beds to show people differences in colors of foliage. So back in the corner there I showed you textures, and now we have colors, and this is another really, really good way to create interest even when things aren't blooming. So I've got the lady's mantle, I've got sedum, heuchera, astilbe, this is a persicaria, I've got a nice blue hosta in there, a brown foliage, that's called anthriscus, my daylily, hostas, ferns. All of this is all different colors. This is part sun, so I can work a little bit more with the colors of the foliage than I can in the full shade. And terrible lighting. I should have been doing this at a different time of day, but this technique of using different colors, you also need to keep in mind the different textures. Even if you are using different colors and you have all the same texture, it's going to be jarring. So yeah, it's kind of, you have to play with both and work them together to see which ones go well. And you can still do the thing of like putting in a pot and like letting it sit there for a little bit, walk around, come back. And if it's like, yeah, I totally love it here, then you can plant it. Yeah, so that's another way to create really nice composition in a garden bed, is paying attention to the color of the foliage. Variegation is a wonderful way to do that. If you don't like, for example, some people don't like black foliage or red foliage or whatever. So that way you can bring in lightness and variation. Right, here's something that doesn't work in the garden. Right here, I have a pathway that I put down. And this Tetrapanax, this big bush here, and my Alstroemeria are obscuring the pathway. So when I want to walk here, I am not inclined to do so because the Tetrapanax is in the way and I have to brush it aside. And then that little shitty ass Alstroemeria down there is being very rude and lying right across my path. That is a really good way to not encourage somebody to go down a pathway. I am going to end up trimming this branch off and probably this one as well over here so that it's more open to come in through here, and encourage this entire Tetrapanax to go up and over so that it creates more of an arching canopy type effect over this pathway. And the Alstroemeria, I'll just cut that bitch off because that's not acceptable. Over here I've got an unobscured path, except for some rowdy poppies, but they'll be pulled out pretty soon because I'll be collecting seeds. Way more welcoming. Nothing, you know, like leaning across it, nothing that I have to push aside. Yeah, so if you're trying to be encouraging with pathways, you know, to encourage people to follow them or to make them more welcoming, get rid of all the bitchy stuff that hangs over it. And, you know, personally, that kind of shit there, I mean, it looks really pretty from back here, but I don't like things touching me when I'm trying to go. I don't like when I'm trying to go on a pathway and shit is like touching me. I just no, just don't touch me, you know, like that's my pathway, that's mine. This space is yours, that's mine. Personal space, dude. Keep to yourself. Yeah, that's my rule. Here's another obscured pathway that I have. All this junk hanging over here. And it is kind of exciting to travel down an obscured pathway in like a woodland type setting. So this part here I'm not too concerned about. It is welcoming in that there is mystery to it. However, when you come back out onto the main pathway, it feels more free and more open, more clean. So there's different energy to it for sure. I wouldn't like this pathway so much if there were things hanging out like over where my arms are and where my face is. It's not quite so bad when it's down by my feet. But that also might just be because I have really keen sensory issues. So a lot of what I'm presenting here in my video is very, very personal and very intuitive to each gardener. So if you find that, you know, the opinions that I'm presenting here or the tips that I'm presenting here do not appeal to you, that is totally peachy. I totally respect that. This is just the ways that I see my garden and things that I like to do to increase the appeal of it. So yeah, to each their own, I say, and brava. Okay, so here we've got a bunch of different textures. We've got a bunch of different colors. And another element that can be really, really used to advantage to create interest in a garden bed is height differences. So at the back, you obviously want your tallest things. And in the front, you want your shortest things. This also applies to the rule of thirds. You don't want half and half, like you don't want half short and then half tall. That's very abrupt and it's hard on the brain in terms of being restful. So in the back there, I've got kind of shrubs just to break up the fence line a little bit, right? And then I've got some of the taller perennials in the middle. And then in the front here, I've got some nice lower things that only grow to about 20 inches tall at the most. So that maintains sort of a sense of like movement as well and flow. Some beds do not look good with this. Some beds cry out for only one size. And I cannot convey to you why certain beds are like that. The narrower the bed is, I think that makes a big difference. Usually narrower beds, if they're very narrow and they're up against a fence, I would suggest only taller things. Not as tall as the fence, but something that's probably 2/3. Again, that rule of third. If your fence is 6 feet high, plant to around 4 feet with a few things in the in the interim to sort of give it a breakup. But, boy, I'm going over a lot of shit here. And this is all, like, so much of it is intuitive. And, I'm not even sure if I'm explaining it well. So, forgive me if I'm not. Feel free to add questions, like, at the bottom if you want to, in the comments or whatever, if you have questions about these things that I'm saying. And I'm going to try, like I said, to put some diagrams so that it really explains it more in a clear fashion instead of me just rambling. Okay, that's that section. All right, I think one of the last things I want to go over is seasonal interest. So in my gardens, I try to work in things that will be of interest as long as possible, whether it's the foliage or the seed heads, or in this case also a hardscaped item, or like a hard item. I don't even know what that would be called. Focal point, I guess. Something that's doesn't need watering. That's going to be there during the winter, and it's going to be interesting. This phlomis here will be here in the winter. These seed pods that are really, really quite pretty, especially when they've dried out. I'm trying to get it to focus, and of course the freaking camera. Oh my god. How can you not read my mind and figure out where I want to focus? Okay, so that's phlomis. This is going to stay like this. Not this color necessarily, but it's going to stay like this until late, late winter. So it's going to be very pretty, very attractive. The grass, this is miscanthus grass. It'll put off seed flowers and seed heads. That will go sort of a tawny gold color, and that will stay all winter. So I'll have interest there. Elements throughout the garden that are evergreen or not needing watering. Like I've got the shell planter in there, my frog on a stump. This is an evergreen rhodo. Things like that. Those will really increase your winter interest in a garden. And a lot of the times too, you can buy plants. I'm going to go over here in this way and show you one. You can buy plants that, when they've lost their leaves, they have a really, really cool structure underneath. And then, if you feel so inclined, you can put a floodlight on them. This one here is a contorted filbert. And look at the structure that's in there, hey? So once all of these leaves have fallen off, all that beautiful twisty curly structure inside shows up, and I can see that in the winter, and when it's covered with snow it also looks really beautiful. Can't imagine thinking about snow right now, but anyway, there's another hard structure. Doesn't need watering. Yeah, so that's a really good way to increase your seasonal interest. Have things around that are evergreen or don't need watering. And they'll be there all winter for you. Just as a bonus, every garden should have a pet. That'll increase the energy of the garden so nicely. Kitties, puppies, bunnies, chickens, whatever, ducks. All of them are just going to make it just feel so much nicer. Hey, Miss Pips. Oh, she must smell something there. Bonus. Oh my God, you guys. Okay, that I don't even know whether I conveyed anything to you. I just kind of just went off. So much came out of my brain and out of my mouth, and obviously I'm just kind of rambling, walking around the garden. A lot of this is just so intuitive, and a lot of it is the way I like to do things. Just some things to think about. You know, there's no right or wrong way to do things unless you're killing your plants or you're not happy with the garden. Then it's not necessarily the right way to do things. But I've just shown you some of how I like to do it and the reasons why. And I'm going to spend some time finding, oof, that's really bright, finding pictures and making some silly diagrams. I'm just going to use like a draw program, so they're not going to be very technical, but to show you what I mean and hopefully like break it down a little bit more so that it's a little easier to understand. All right, my friends. Peace out.